Chapter 1. Into the Depths. The days that followed were marked by an uneasy silence. Despite the urgent call to action, Köykkä found it difficult to escape the shadow of uncertainty that clung to him. The sorceress's words haunted him. "You are no longer just a man, you are a vessel for death." He had fought death once, survived it even, but now he could feel it tugging at him again, a cold, gnawing presence deep within his chest, feeding on the remnants of his soul. The hunger was subtle, but growing. The magic of necromancy was inside him, alive and twisting, bound to his very being. Korppi, always at his side, had insisted that they prepare. She had rallied the survivors of their people, the remnants of the city nations and the scattered tribes. She spoke of strength and resolve, but even she could not hide the fear in her eyes. The fear of what Köykkä had become. They stood now, overlooking the edge of the forest. The trees stretched far into the horizon, their dark canopies a wall against the setting sun. There was an unnatural stillness to the place, as if the very land knew that something was about to change. "You sure you want to do this?" Korppi's voice broke through his thoughts. She stood beside him, her posture tense but resolute. "I have no choice," Köykkä replied, though even as he said it, a part of him wished he could turn away. But the cold within him had grown stronger with every passing day, every breath. If he didn't confront this now, it would consume him. "The necromancer who bound me must be stopped. If I am to save myself, I have no choice but to face him." Korppi nodded, though her lips pressed tightly together. She had lost too much, too many, in the past few years. And now, she faced the possibility of losing him as well. "We leave at dawn," she said softly. "The path will be treacherous. We'll be crossing into the realm of the dead itself. It's not a place for the living, Köykkä. The veil is thin there, and if we're not careful, we might lose ourselves completely." Köykkä felt the weight of her words settle in his gut. He didn't want to admit it, but deep down, he knew she was right. The necromancer's influence was already pulling at him. If he stepped into the realm of the dead, there was no guarantee he would return the same, or return at all. "I'll be ready," he said, though there was a lingering doubt in his voice. Korppi studied him for a moment, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to read the depths of his soul. Then, with a determined nod, she turned and walked toward the camp. "I'll get the others prepared. We leave before the first light." The night was long and filled with restless sleep. Köykkä's dreams were dark. Fragments of faces, twisted and unfamiliar, flashed before his eyes. He could hear whispers, voices calling to him from the shadows, but every time he reached for them, they slipped away, like smoke through his fingers. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the camp stirred to life. The survivors had gathered their weapons, packed their gear, and readied themselves for the journey. Sigfried, Ylva, and the others stood in a quiet circle, waiting for the final decision to be made. Korppi walked up to him, her expression calm but somber. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. Köykkä nodded, though the doubt still lingered in his chest. "As ready as I'll ever be." Ylva, standing beside Sigfried, gave them both a long, appraising look. Her eyes were ancient, her presence calm, but filled with an undeniable power. "The path you seek is not one to tread lightly," she said, her voice a melodic whisper that seemed to carry the weight of the forest itself. "The realm of the dead is a place of darkness, of forgotten things. It will test you, Köykkä, and it will test your resolve. Are you prepared to face what lies ahead?" Köykkä met her gaze. "I have no choice but to face it." "Then let us begin," Ylva said, turning to lead the way. The journey through the forest was slow, the trees dense and unyielding. Every step seemed to take them deeper into the heart of the world, further from the safety of their encampment, further from the world of the living. Köykkä could feel it then, the pull of the necromantic magic within him, whispering, tugging at his very soul. He couldn't help but shiver. The forest seemed to close in around them, the path narrowing, the shadows growing darker. After several days of travel, they arrived at a clearing where the air was thick with the scent of decay. The ground was cracked and barren, and the trees around them were twisted, their branches like skeletal hands reaching toward the sky. The place felt wrong, like the very earth was corrupted. "This is it," Korppi said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "The veil is thin here. This is where the living can cross over into the realm of the dead." Köykkä stood at the edge of the clearing, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the pull now, more than ever. The cold presence inside him was stronger here, almost suffocating. He reached for his chest, as though trying to quiet the gnawing hunger within. Ylva stepped forward, her hands raised in a calm, graceful gesture. The air around them seemed to shimmer, the very fabric of reality bending. "The crossing will not be easy," she said. "The spirits that guard the veil are ancient. They will test you, Köykkä. They will test your soul." Köykkä turned to Korppi, his gaze steady but filled with the uncertainty of the path ahead. "If I fail, if I'm consumed by this darkness, will you remember me?" Her eyes softened, her hand resting on his arm. "I will always remember you, Köykkä. No matter what happens, you will never be forgotten." With that, she gave him a small nod, and Köykkä turned back to face the clearing. He could hear the wind whispering through the trees, like voices calling to him from beyond the veil. Ylva raised her staff, and the air seemed to crackle with power. The ground beneath them trembled, and for a moment the world seemed to warp and distort. Then, with a single command, Ylva brought her staff down. The clearing rippled, the fabric of reality bending and twisting like a veil being pulled aside. And through that veil, Köykkä saw it, the realm of the dead. It was a place of shadow and silence, a world where the living did not belong. The air was thick with the weight of countless souls, their faces twisted in sorrow, their voices a distant echo that seemed to pierce the very heart. The ground was blackened, the sky a sickly green, and in the distance, Köykkä could make out the silhouette of a towering figure. The necromancer, and as the veil parted, Köykkä took his first step into the realm of the dead. The cold of it washed over him, the hunger inside him clawing at the edges of his soul. But he did not stop. He could not stop. Not now. Korppi followed him closely, her presence a steady reminder that he was not alone. Sigfried, Ylva, and the others followed as well. But Köykkä knew the true battle lay ahead. It was not just the necromancer he would face. It was the darkness inside himself. Chapter 2, The Beast's Aid. The realm of the dead stretched endlessly before them, an endless void of shadows, where twisted trees rose like the broken fingers of the earth, their gnarled limbs clawing at the rotting sky. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and every breath felt like inhaling the remnants of souls long lost. It was a place between worlds, a place of torment and desolation. Here, the dead lingered in silence, trapped in an eternal limbo. Köykkä's heart pounded in his chest as he stepped forward, the hunger within him stirring with each passing second. The cold grip of the necromantic magic pulsed inside him, pulling at his very soul, but he fought it back with every ounce of his will. He couldn't afford to be consumed now, not when the fate of his people and his own life hung in the balance. Korppi stood close behind him, her presence a silent reassurance, but even her strength could not quell the unease that settled like a stone in his stomach. The necromancer's influence was near. He could feel it in the oppressive air, in the way the world around them seemed to bend and twist, as though reality itself were on the verge of unraveling. "Stay alert," Köykkä murmured, his voice low but steady. "We're close, I can feel his presence." Korppi nodded, her hand instinctively resting on the hilt of her blade. Ylva, walking beside them, was silent, her expression unreadable as she focused on the energies swirling around them. The druid was their guide, but even she seemed to be struggling with the weight of this place. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet trembled. The air shifted, rippling with an unnatural chill. A low growl echoed through the fog, deep and guttural, reverberating through the hollowed trees. Köykkä's senses sharpened. He had heard that sound before, the primal growl of a predator. But this was different. The growl was not of some beast, but something far darker, a creature born from the twisted energies of this forsaken place. From the darkness emerged a figure, tall and broad, his shape partially obscured by the mist. A man, or at least he seemed to be at first glance. But then Köykkä saw the gleaming eyes, the fur bristling along his broad shoulders, and the sharp claws that dug into the earth like an animal in its hunting stance. "Ulric," Ylva called softly, her tone both relieved and commanding. "We have need of your strength." The figure stepped forward, revealing more of his form, a towering werewolf, his body a fusion of man and beast, with the kind of power and agility only a predator could possess. His fur was a mix of dark grey and silver, his features sharp and fierce, but his eyes, those eyes were the eyes of a hunter, calculating and intelligent. "Köykkä," the werewolf growled, his voice a deep, resonant rumble. "Ylva," he nodded curtly. "I've been tracking the necromancer's scent. It's strong here, he's not far." "I thought we might be able to count on your aid," Ylva said, turning toward the wolfman with a quiet smile, her eyes glimmering with a sense of both respect and wariness. "We will need all the strength we can muster." Ulric's lips curled into a grim smile. "Then let's end this before the darkness consumes us all." As he finished speaking, the ground cracked beneath them, and from the earth rose a twisted figure, cloaked in shadow, with eyes that gleamed like the embers of a dying fire. The necromancer, tall and thin, his features obscured by a hood and cloak, stepped forward, his presence like an oppressive weight in the air. "You should not have come here, Köykkä." The necromancer's voice was a rasp, thin and cruel, as though it were coming from deep within the grave itself. "You belong to the dead now. The darkness has claimed you, and I will be the one to bind your soul forever." Köykkä gripped his blade tighter, the pulse of the necromantic magic inside him growing stronger, reacting to the necromancer's presence. "I will not be your puppet," he snarled. Before the necromancer could respond, Ulric let out a roar and charged forward, his massive form a blur of fur and muscle. His claws swiped through the air, sending arcane sparks flying as he collided with the necromancer's shadowy defenses. Köykkä moved swiftly, his own body a blur as he leapt into the fray. His sword cut through the air with precision, aiming for the necromancer's heart, but the shadowy figure merely laughed, twisting out of the way with an unnatural grace. Ylva, standing back, began chanting in an ancient tongue. The very ground around them seemed to shift, the earth rising in jagged formations, as though answering her call. But the necromancer had anticipated this, and with a flick of his wrist, he summoned a wave of dark energy that shattered the stone into dust, sending the magic crashing back toward Ylva. Köykkä lunged to intercept the wave, his body moving instinctively, but he was too slow. The energy struck him with a blast of cold, numbing power, sending him stumbling backward. His vision blurred, and the hunger inside him surged, as if the necromancer's magic was feeding it. He fell to his knees, struggling to control the cold fire burning within him. "Not yet!" Korppi's voice rang out, filled with fierce determination. She rushed to his side, her blade flashing as she fended off a wave of spectral minions summoned by the necromancer. "Get up, Köykkä! This is not the end! Not for you!" Through the haze of pain and magic, Köykkä heard her words, and they were enough to stir him from his stupor. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand. The hunger within him clawed at the edges of his mind, but he shoved it aside, focusing on the battle. There was no time to lose. He stood, shaking off the remnants of the necromancer's magic, and his eyes found Korppi's, steady and sure. She had always been his anchor. She was still here, fighting for him, fighting with him. Meanwhile, Ulric had taken the fight to a whole new level. His claws slashed through the necromancer's defenses, tearing through shadows and spirits with deadly precision. His teeth bared, he tore into the necromancer's ethereal minions, each strike powerful enough to send them scattering like dust. But even the beast's strength couldn't slow the necromancer's onslaught. With a flick of his fingers, the dark sorcerer summoned more spectral soldiers, and this time they began to press in on Korppi, surrounding her in a deadly circle. "Köykkä!" Korppi cried out as a handful of the wraiths lunged at her from behind, their claws extending with deadly intent. Without thinking, Ulric bolted toward her, moving faster than any mortal man could hope to follow. He leapt into the fray, his claws extending like daggers, raking through the wraiths with terrifying force. He moved like a predator, fluid and unstoppable, tearing through the ethereal shadows with a ferocity that left the necromancer's minions howling in pain. Korppi's breath caught in her throat as Ulric cleared the last of the wraiths, his eyes meeting hers in a moment of fierce primal connection. She nodded in silent gratitude. But there was no time for respite. The necromancer's eyes burned with hatred as he raised his staff high, summoning a surge of black magic so powerful that the air itself seemed to bend and twist around it. Köykkä stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "This ends now," he muttered. With a final, blood-curdling cry, Ulric pounced once more, this time aiming for the necromancer's throat. The dark sorcerer twisted, but not fast enough. Ulric's claws sank deep into the necromancer's flesh, tearing through the shadows like paper. As the necromancer staggered back, weakened but not defeated, Köykkä's blade flashed through the air, cutting through the heart of the sorcerer's defenses. With one final, resounding strike, the necromancer's body crumpled to the ground, his shadowy form dissipating into smoke. The silence that followed was deafening. Köykkä stood amidst the wreckage, breathing heavily, his eyes scanning the battlefield for any remaining threats. Ulric, panting from the exertion, lowered his claws, his eyes locking with Köykkä's. "You're not as dead as I thought," Ulric grinned, though his voice was laced with exhaustion. "But next time, maybe you should stay in the land of the living." Köykkä allowed himself a small, weary smile. "I'm not finished yet." And together they stood, the battle behind them, but the war far from over. Chapter 3: A Haunting Road. The days that followed their escape from the realm of the dead were filled with silence. Köykkä and Korppi led the group through a labyrinth of darkened forest paths, stepping carefully as though each step might unravel the fragile border between the worlds they'd crossed. Though they had defeated the necromancer, Köykkä could still feel its lingering presence, twisting inside him like a dark echo, growing stronger with every breath. The others could sense it too. Ylva's wise gaze softened when it fell on him, though she kept her counsel to herself. Siegfried watched him with wary glances, keeping his distance, as if unsure what Köykkä had become. And even Korppi, ever his fiercest ally, was quieter than usual, her dark eyes weighed down by worry. When they finally reached the edge of the familiar forest, Köykkä halted, the stillness broken only by the rush of the river nearby and the cries of ravens circling above. Before them, the land began to open wide and green, a welcome sight, but one that Köykkä felt fading in his heart, even as he looked at it. His home was close, and yet he felt farther from it than ever. He turned to the group, forcing a steady voice. "This is where we part ways." Korppi's brow furrowed, her body tense as she waited for him to explain. "This curse within me, it grows stronger each day. If I don't confront it, if I stay among you, I fear I may become something else, something dangerous. I can't bring that home." Ylva nodded, her expression solemn. "The journey has changed you, Köykkä, as we knew it might, but the forest will remember what you did. We all will." Sigfried stepped forward, pressing a flask into Köykkä's hand. "For courage," he said, his voice low but sincere. "Face the curse, but return to us." Köykkä nodded, feeling the warmth of his friend's loyalty settle in his chest. Then Korppi's voice, soft but unyielding, cut through the quiet. "Then I'm going with you." Köykkä's eyes widened. "Korppi, no, this curse, this battle, I need to face it alone. I can't risk you getting hurt or worse." Her expression was set, her gaze steady. "No, Köykkä, we've fought together too long for you to go now without me. You are my family, and I won't leave you to face this alone. Whatever lies ahead, we face it together." A part of him wanted to argue, to insist she stay where it was safe. But when he looked into her eyes, he saw the determination he'd always relied on, the fierce loyalty that had saved him time and again. He couldn't deny her, nor could he deny how much her presence steadied him, even now. "Then come," he said, the words weighed down by both relief and foreboding. They turned to Ylva and Sigfried, who nodded in quiet understanding. Ylva placed a gentle hand on Köykkä's arm, her expression filled with the wisdom of countless battles. "This path is dark, but may it also lead you to light. Remember that no curse can destroy the spirit within you." Sigfried clasped Köykkä's arm in a firm grip. We'll keep the home fires burning. Both of you, stay safe." Köykkä nodded in gratitude, and Korppi met their friends' gazes with a fierce resolve. Without another word, Köykkä and Korppi turned toward the heart of the forest, leaving the familiar landscape behind as they stepped into the unknown. Side by side, they walked in silence. Köykkä felt the chill of the curse creeping within him, a constant, gnawing hunger that could only grow stronger. But with Korppi at his side, he felt a warmth too, a defiance, a reminder that he was not alone in this. Whatever lay ahead, whatever darkness he had to face, he knew he would meet it with Korppi beside him. And as they disappeared into the shadowed trees, a sense of quiet understanding settled among those they'd left behind. No matter the cost, Köykkä and Korppi would face this darkness together, bound by a loyalty stronger than any curse.